Okay. Right here. This one here. Okay. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, these are my notes. And really, this is kind of what we're going to cover today. What I don't finish up, I'll finish up tomorrow in class. But the video that I posted for you guys to watch is pretty good on this as well. We're talking about our essay. So your first paragraph of your essay was over um, the the English tradition on our government. Okay. Magna Carta petition, right, English Bill of Rights, and then how the colonies changed over time, the three types of colonies and the forms of government that they had. Okay, and then the last lecture I talked about the Albany Plan of Union, the Stamp Act, Congress, the Stamp Act, the Congress, and so that's kind of where we'll start today. So the British actually repealed the Stamp Act, and that was good. John Adams had written the Rights and Grievances, Declaration of Rights and Grievances, and but they came back with more taxes, Sugar, Tea Act, and then I put down here at the bottom just a list of different acts and taxes on the colonies during this time period. So Stamp Act is 1765, the Tea Act 73. Obviously, we won't respond well to that. The Sugar Stamp Act here. Yeah, so we'll just kind of work our way through some of these, okay? And so, guys, as these new taxes came on, there was this group called the Committees of Correspondence. And this group is really what will be the precursor to the Sons of Liberty. And so you got guys like John Hancock, John Adams, Sam Adams, Ben Franklin, Thomas Paine, Alexander Hamilton. And we can talk about each of those, spend some time on them. The video does a pretty good job with that. So they kept the kind of the spirit alive. They were corresponding with each other. They were corresponding with Britain, with Parliament, with the King, really explaining their dislike of this control. Remember, we had 150 years of salutary neglect, and the end of the French and Indian War really ushers in this time of control that the British have over the colonies. And so they began to reject this, okay? And so, they began stockpiling weapons outside of Boston. Really, the people behind that were Hancock was, the wealthiest man in Boston, and Sam Adams was kind of your community organizer, the underworld of Boston, the taverns and so forth, of the working man, the people that worked in the shipyards and, dealing with tax collectors and these different regulations of trade that they're placing on the people of Boston and the colonies themselves. And so there's this kind of underwell of support in opposition to the British. The British had kept troops in Boston, in the New World, after the French and Indian War. And they were a constant reminder of, the royal presence, and there was a lot of dislike towards that. So in 1770, you have this, this major incident that takes place called the Boston Massacre. And really what was happening here was, the British troops were, stationed on street corners and so forth at their post, and they were being harassed by the citizens of Boston. As the story goes, yeah, they were throwing snowballs at the soldiers and so forth. But what was really happening was those snowballs were chunks of ice, or snowballs filled with chunks of ice, or oyster shells were used for the streets. Being in Boston, a lot of oyster shells, they would, crush those and use them so it wasn't so muddy on the streets. And so, at times, clubs as well were used to throw at the troops. And one of the British soldiers' musket discharged, and that led to several firing shots. In the end, 9 people were actually shot, 5 were killed. Little, American trivia there. You might have heard of the one of the 5 that died was a runaway slave. His name was Crispus Attucks, or Crispus Attucus. Died. Some that were shot were young. I mean, they were teenagers, young people. So this really set off a lot of anger that the British had opened fire. Now, if you know this history, you know that John Adams, who's actually a lawyer there in Boston, he's also a farmer. He has a farm outside the city. He is going to represent these soldiers at trial. And the fact that they hold this trial in America, in Boston, with a Boston jury, Adams will make the case that this was not a massacre. It was a mob. It was they attacked the soldiers and they were defending themselves. And in the end, Adams, who didn't really want to take this case, but it's going to cost him a lot with his law practice, because there's a lot of people that are upset with him. He's gonna get them acquitted of murder charges. These guys would have been hanged if found guilty. So what it shows, and even with this anger towards the British taxes, that some would refer to as tyranny, that these soldiers received a fair trial by a Boston jury in 1770, and that says a lot. So it says a lot about John Adams. It says a lot about the men of Boston and so forth. So they are acquitted. The tensions are high. Another name that we're very familiar with here is Sam Adams. Excuse me, Paul Revere. You've all heard that name. Paul Revere is actually going to depict the Boston Massacre in an etching or a lithograph that is reprinted all over the colonies and is used as propaganda against the British. You've all seen the lithograph. I'll show you in class tomorrow. I have a baseball with it. Actually, give me a second. I don't know how well you can see this, but this is, hopefully I'm holding this up in front of the camera here. This is the picture that Paul Revere made of the Boston Massacre. It's in every American textbook by Paul Revere there. You can see that. But anyhow, that will be used to really drum up angst against the British, okay? And then in 1773, as you guys can see here, the Boston Tea Party. Actually, I might be able to share this with you. Can you see that new one I just put up?
What's that?
Can you see this PowerPoint that I just put up?
No.
Okay. Yeah. How do I do this? All right. Well, that's all right. I'll show you in class. But anyhow, so the Boston Tea Party, in response to the tax on tea in 1773, and you could only buy British tea. Guys, this is becoming a revolutionary act. We're seeing tar and feathering of tax collectors and British, regulators that are checking the ships for contraband and so forth. And Hancock, guys, he's a big ship owner. He owns several ships, does a lot of trading, and the British were restricting who we could trade with, what we could import from other countries. And really, this idea of mercantilism is really being enforced. So the Tea Party is a reaction to that. And yes, these people are breaking the law. They dressed up as Mohawk Indians. I mean, you can imagine the scene. These men sitting around in a tavern in 1773, drinking, getting drunk, angry, ranting against the British government, and somebody comes up with this idea to storm these ships in the middle of the night, dress up like Indians, and throw that British tea into the harbor. And they pull this off. But the British are not going to respond well to this. Okay, so what we're going to see here in 1774 is the Intolerable Acts. Okay, do I have that on there? You should definitely have that. Okay. Okay. What the British referred to as coercive. And these are really going to be the ones that kind of break the camel's back here. This is what you have is with this with these coercive acts or intolerable acts in 1774 is a crackdown. They're going to shut down Boston Harbor. No ships will be allowed in and out. So it's going to bring commerce to a halt. They are going to quarter soldiers in people's homes. They're going to send more troops into Boston. Boston will become an occupied city. In the Intolerable Acts, they talk about how if a British subject is on trial for a capital crime, they will be transported back to Britain for trial. And this is really where John Adams, who at the beginning, he's a lawyer, he believes in the law, he doesn't hate the British, he's upset with them. Sam Adams is, he's the revolutionary, him and Hancock and Payne and these others that are, causing these problems for the British. John Adams isn't like that. But when they say that these British subjects will be shipped back for capital trials in England rather than in the colonies, this really upsets John Adams because he risked his entire livelihood to represent these British soldiers and got them off, showing that they could receive a fair trial in the New World, and the British are ignoring that. And so this is where you see John Adams really start to change sides, okay? And so there will be a call for the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia, okay, in 1774, okay? And all of the colonies will send representatives there, with the exception of Georgia. Georgia will not send anyone. And this is in response to the Intolerable Acts, okay? They will organize boycotts against the king, threaten to meet again if necessary. But in all honesty, guys, not much comes out of this First Continental Congress. Now, it was illegal for them to even have this in Philadelphia based on the British rules, but they did it anyways, okay? And John Adams went to that. Sam Adams went. Hancock went. And they said, look, if things don't improve here, we will meet again, okay? And then this is the date that changes everything, okay? As I said, they had been stockpiling weapons and powder out in Lexington and Concord, which is about 10 miles outside of Boston. And the British, with General Thomas Gates, is going to send his men out there and they're looking for Hancock. They're looking for Sam Adams, and they want to arrest them. They also want to seize these guns and this powder. Okay. And these people have, they believe in the right to bear arms. This is something that we talked about, we found in the English Bill of Rights. And they're thinking the British have become tyrannical here. And so when those troops start marching out to Lexington and Concord, the militia is going to show up. They call them the Minutemen. They are going to meet them on the road. Now, these militia have been fighting against the Native Americans and so forth for a century at least, and they are not going to fight with the traditional British English linear tactics, which is what European armies used, lining up in a field and firing at each other. They're going to use guerrilla tactics, and they're going to hide behind trees. They are going to sneak out. They're going to fire on these British soldiers, these redcoats, which do not blend in very well with the environment. They're very easy to see. And they will send them packing back to Boston after killing many British soldiers. There will be Americans that will die as well. Now, these Minutemen, they're made up of farmers, shopkeepers, blacksmiths, doctors, lawyers, young teenagers, boys as young as 13, firing muskets at the British. This is the community. This is the neighborhood coming together to defend their neighborhood, and they were good at it. So with this, guys, this is going to touch off a very strong reaction from the British. More troops will be sent in, and there will be a call for a Second Continental Congress. That will take place in May of 1775. So just a month after Lexington and Concord, which really only takes place a few miles from John Adams' farm. They will head back to Philadelphia, okay? And this time, all 13 colonies will send delegates. And at the beginning here, it is, how do we respond to this? Massachusetts' blood has been shed. Shortly after this, while they're at the Continental Congress, the Battle of Bunker Hill will take place. And this is, goes back to the old William Prescott, don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes, at Bunker Hill outside of Boston. And so there's basically a war going on up in Massachusetts, but Massachusetts is not the 13 colonies. So trying to convince these other colonies that we're at war with the British and that we need to separate from the British is not an easy task. Okay. If you look at the dates, May, June, July. Okay. July 4th is when they signed the Declaration of Independence. Okay. So this is going to be a couple of months of heated debate while we basically have the American Revolution taking place. They need an army. And so they appoint General Washington. Now, Washington, guys, is from Virginia, also at the Second Continental Congress, from Virginia. William Henry Lee, Thomas Jefferson is there, of course. Hancock is the president of the Continental Congress, the second one. And these are the best and the brightest from each of the 13 colonies. Franklin will be there from Pennsylvania, Rutherford from South Carolina. And where you're going to meet resistance to this independence is from the South, from Pennsylvania, not Franklin so much, but others in that delegation. And John Adams, guys, becomes the driving force behind independence, okay? His family is there outside of Boston at the farm, while the British are assailing their colony, and he's hot. He's angry. That is going to rub people some the wrong way. He is disliked, and so Franklin's got to tell him, look, John Adams, you've got to calm down. You've got to win these people over. And so as time goes on, they, in this Congress, you got to have 9 of 13 to pass anything. So to get the Declaration of Independence, or even to write a declaration, they need 9 of colonies to agree, and they're not getting that. John Adams is not getting 9. And Hancock, who definitely agrees with John Adams, says, you know what? If we're going to do this, it needs to be all 13 colonies, not 9. We can't go to war with the British with only 9 of the 13. We'd be at war. We'd be at civil war with each other. So Hancock brings up this, we need unanimity. We need a unanimous vote. And so over time, Washington will, be fighting against the British. He'll be fleeing from the British. But guys, Adams is going to convince him. Franklin will help convince the other colonies. And so on July 4th, they will write the Declaration of or sign the Declaration of Independence, of course, penned by Jefferson, with a huge impact from, influence of John Locke, as we talked about earlier. Okay. And so this first government is formed. Basically, our first government is the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia. It is not until March 1st of 1781, the Revolution lasts till 1783, that they write the Articles of Confederation. Okay. And that second government will actually be in New York, but they're going to be in Philadelphia until the war's over. In fact, they're going to have to flee Philadelphia as the British close in on the city at different parts of times during the war. So this is a unicameral-led body of the Articles of Confederation. It's one legislature, no executive branch, no judicial branch, and we'll talk all about that. Okay. So what I'd like to say, if any of you guys have Amazon Prime, that show, John Adams, the first 2 episodes, goes through all of this in great detail. It's a couple hours of great viewing time. But the video I posted for you guys, Rebels with a Cause, definitely something that you'll want to watch as you prepare to write your essay. Okay. So this is somewhat of a timeline, guys. Okay. So, going back, to 1607 to 1776. All right. And then your last paragraph is going to be focused on the founding fathers, some of these speeches, obviously the Declaration of Independence, that I will talk about in class tomorrow. Okay. And I'll talk about the test. Okay. Tomorrow. And I'll review with you guys. The review sheet is up on Canvas. So you can look at that. So Thursday and Friday, still planning on the objective test, which is the first part of the notes. And then Monday and Tuesday of next week, the essay test. And I'll wrap up that discussion for the essay and talk about that some more tomorrow. Does that sound good? I know that's a lot.
Sounds good.
Okay. So I'm going to sign off here, guys, and I'll post this video for those that didn't make it. Okay? Okay, I got that back up. Get my stuff figured out here. All right. Oops. That's not what I wanted. I'll see you guys later.